Test 1, 2, 3. Okay, looks like we are live, and I'm going to check that just to make sure. Alexis, no, actually, I think it's Carrie. Yeah, Carrie, this will be a live stream I'm doing just based on your thing, because I don't feel like editing it down and making music. And so this is going to be an introduction to custom rigging, creating your own inverse kinematics IK lines, and then using the bare minimum of structures that are in Duik. When you get a deeper dive into character rigging, doing a custom one sometimes is the best way to go. So let me check and make sure that I am live. Let's see this. Yep, okay, good. And I'm going to start. So here we go. I'm going to give you an overview of the custom rig I made. Then I'm going to show you how to create the individual pieces. So the legs. The legs are the same as arms in the human body, and you can use inverse kinematics for that. And you can do position and rotation for those controllers. Okay? And I'm going to show you how to troubleshoot what's going to happen with this. So each leg is an inverse kinematics rig with a position or rotation at the foot. Then I've got, before you set up your IK rig, you have to parent everything properly. And I'll show you that. But the end of the limb where it meets the body, I have it parented to these. Now watch what happens here. You can set up a trot for the front legs and the back legs independently so they can be offset, so the legs in the front move at a different timing than the back. I did that by not parenting your hips to your body section. So your artwork went hips, body, and then chest. You had 3 separate regions. Watch what happens if I take your hips, I parent them to the body, then I parent the body to, well, before they were parented there, but if I parent the body to the chest, watch what happens when I rotate the chest. Now all 4 legs move together, okay, for the trot. So if you want all 4 legs to move together, that would be having the hip parented to the body and then the body parented to the chest. But if your middle section is not parented to anything, you can offset your animation for a trot. That might be what you want. It's up to you. So I'm going to remind you of that later on. I parented the neck to the head, and I've got a position rotate controller there as well. So you see that moving like such. And then finally I used puppet pins on your tail and then created bones from that and parented the bones to the tail structure. And you've already worked with the tail structure, and you already know that you can go into your effects for the tail. And let's see, where's your tail controller? Right here. And with this, you could just animate the curve and have the tail move that way. It's fast and easy. And I've got the tail parented to the hips. So this, you can independently move each limb as you see fit, rotate the feet. You can also move 2 legs together, or you could parent it so all 4 of them move together. I think this type of rig will get you faster results than trying the structures auto rig that Duik created. And I'm going to log on real fast to my other computer just to see if anyone hops on. And again, this is an unofficial live stream. I'm just too lazy to edit this down. Okay. I'm going to dive into it step by step in a second. Once I've got the second page up and running. And here we go. And there we are. All right, fantastic. Okay, so here's the full rig, like I said, and I'll be referencing this off and on. Here's your artwork that you had, and you've got your limbs broken down with your connector dots. First step, the anchor points were not centered. So what I did was I centered each part of the body. So if I'm here, you can see I put your anchor points where your connector dots are, and I did that by using the pan behind tool and moving them that way. Okay, so I'm going to rig one leg and show you that goes because I've already rigged the other ones. So here's how to rig a leg, and this is the exact same if you want to rig an arm or like a human arm or a human leg, anything like the Pixar lamp. You can do the same thing for here. So here's the way it works. Right up here is where it's connected to the body, and down here is the furthest part from the body. Okay, right here at the foot is where I'm going to set up my first controller, and then I'm going to use parenting to set the rest up. But the first step is always set your anchor points, okay? And I set them where your center dots are for your character. Next step is think about the parenting of the artwork. Before you even set up your bones or your structures or your controllers or your connectors, you're going to parent things. The paw is parented to this part of the body. So I just pick whip from there to there, and this works its way up the chain. This is I pick whip to parent there, and then this I pick whip to parent to there. Let's see if that, yeah, that's that top part of the artwork. Now this part where it meets the body, I find which art layer that is connected to, and I believe that is the chest for your artwork. Yeah, so this meets up with the chest. So this is the end of my rig. The top, I parent to the part of the body it meets at. So it's the paw, above the paw, the shin, then, you know, the calf, and the calf would be parented to the chest. That artwork layer right there. So I've got it all parented. Now I can work on my rig. I set up the paw because that's the furthest part from the body. I go to my rigging. Now don't forget, we've already clicked the wrench and set up standard. We are not on rookie. If you got to change it, click the wrench, go to rookie, click, make it standard, then hit apply changes. We've already done that, so I'm going to hit back. So there's rigging, you got your structures, links and constraints, and then your controllers. I've got my paw selected, and under the third tab, controllers, I'm going to give it a position rotate controller. And that's going to line up exactly where my anchor point was. That's why I did the anchor points, then parented the art layers, then I added the controller, okay? So here's the way this is going to work. The controller we created is right up here. Here's the ones I've created before I started the live stream to test out the rig. The way this works, you select the far point first, which is the paw. Hold down Control or Command and click your way up to the top part, which is where it meets the chest. Then lastly, you click on the controller you just created, which was this one right here. So I held down Control and I went from the bottom up to the top. Then I clicked on the controller I made. All right. Now in the links and constraints, auto rig and IK, then you've got your more options circle. I click the more options circle and I want IK, inverse kinematics. I click that. Now you see the IK line, and here's what I was talking about, the goofy stuff happening. So to prevent that from happening, you go to your effects panel, effects controllers. You got this paw, then you've got this paw too. The weight on that paw is only at 50%. Watch what happens when I change it to 100. Now it's behaving properly because the full weight is on that. All I did in paw 2, I changed the weight to 100. Now it's looking normal and behaving normal. I'm going to add a solid in the background just so that I can get rid of the transparency grid. There we go. Now we're going to test it out. So here's the controller we parented everything to. I hit the P key and you see it is not zeroed out. Remember, I want you to zero these out so that you can get to your resting neutral pose much easier. And to zero it out, you're in rigging, links and constraints. You got selected what you want to zero out and you click the 0 button right there. Now it's zeroed out. So now if I move this, the leg is behaving properly. Like Command Z to undo. And I can also hit R for rotate. And we can rotate the toes with the foot as well. So I did that for each leg. Okay? You already saw how I created the IK rig. And I did it here. Now this leg right here, it's connected to the chest as well. Your back legs, I connected to the hips, which is the back part where they meet up with. So you would rig all your way up, and then the top part you would parent to the hips. The midsection you called body. Nothing is parented to that at this point. Back legs are parented to the hips. Front legs are parented to the chest. And then I set up the IK rig. So that is how you get the dog legs working. 4 IK rigs with controllers that have position and rotation at the feet. So you saw the other controllers I created throughout the body. I'll show you how I did the hips. The hips, the body, and the chest all have position and rotation controllers connected to them. And this is fast and simple. Here's your hips. I've got to move the anchor point so that it lines up with where your connector dots are, so that your rig will work a little better. You basically want to get it in the center of the dot. So your hips are good, your anchor point's good. All I have to do, select my hips, rigging, third button, create controller. I want a position and rotation. Now that's there. So let's zoom out. This right here, back leg, I parent that to the hip controller. There's back leg 2. I parent that to the hips. Now let's test out the hips. See, the legs move and they trot along with the hips. And if I rotate that hip controller, the legs will swing with it if that's what you want. And I've got to zero that out because it's not zeroed. So I go back to my rigging and I click 0. And we'll test it out. Still works fine. Perfect. Now, next to the hips is your body section. And I've got to move the anchor point for that. Like such. Close enough. Now for the body, we've got our anchor point set. I go back to my controllers and I do a position and rotation. Now remember, I'm going to leave nothing parented to this at the moment. Now the chest, move the anchor point again with the pan behind tool right up here. Let me see where that went. I'm going to hold down Control and double click. Okay, I'm going to move it one more time. That's a little better. So with my chest selected, I'm going to give it a position and rotation. And then my front legs, right here, I'm going to parent up to the chest controller, like such. Go back to my rigging and zero the chest. So now, if I rotate this, the front legs move. So we've got an independent trot for the front and the back legs at this point. Now, if you want all four legs to move together with that trot rotation I just showed you how I created, to get that to work together, you're going to rig all three of these together. But if you got them separate like I do, you've got far more control over your character. All right? So the hips would be parented to the body controller. The body controller would be parented to the chest controller. So now if I rotate the chest, all four legs trot together. That's if you want all four to move together. If not, you just turn off the parenting on the body controller. So now these go on their own, and then these go on their own. You can offset your animation. That handles your whole body right here. I'm going to shy the artwork, but not turn off the eyes for it, for the legs, just to free up some space. I'm done with the markers for here, so I can turn off the eye for that so we don't see it anymore. Next, I'll do the tail. You've got two layers for that, a tail and your tail fluff. And this broke on your first rig because you need to have the fluff parented to the tail. But what I'm going to do, and I've told you this before, when I've got to put down puppet pins, I pre-compose that section first. Because if I need to make any changes, I can go inside that pre-comp and make my changes, and the pins will still be on the outside of the pre-comp, and it won't distort your artwork. So with the fluff and the tail selected, I'm going to right click and choose pre-compose. Call it tail PC for pre-comp, and click move all attributes. Now I can put my pins on the tail. Just going to save so I don't lose this. Alright, now I don't know where I want those pins to be, so that's why I'm going to go into the structures and click tail. And just like magic, there's the tail. So I click on the first part of the tail. I'm just going to move it up. And I'm going to solo the four structures for the tail. And I'm also going to solo the pre-comp for the tail. And I'm going to solo the blue background just so we're not staring at, you know, the alpha grid, because that gives me a headache if I stare at it too long. Alright. I want the first part of the tail structure there, so I click on the next part. And I'm just eyeballing this. I know there's 4 parts, so I'm going to want it to basically be evenly spaced. Again, I go to the next part of the structure, I click on it, then I move it, and I want to keep it about in the center of the artwork. And then finally, the last piece, like such. So I've got those lined up. Now the fast and easy way, since I've already got my tail structure lined up, is to click on the tail pre-comp we made, go to my puppet pin tool, and put one pin down. Why one pin? Because the second I put down my first pin, remember, in Duik, you must switch the puppet engine to legacy. And then you want at least 300 triangles, so there's, you don't lose or distort your artwork too much. So I just add a pin to where the center of each of these structures is. So I've got all 4 pins. You must switch the engine to legacy, and then you must go down to deform and name each pin. If you don't name your pins, the bones won't work, and then you can't parent the bones to the structures, and then you can't click on the structures to create your auto rig for that structure. So step 1, always switch the puppet engine to legacy. Now, I name these in the order that they're going to be at. I hit the enter key to rename it. And when I click on one, it highlights which one it is. So I just look up my structure up here, and I know this one's going to be tail 2. And this one's going to be tail 3, the name of the structure above it. I just hit the enter key. And last, I call the final one tail tip. And I misspelled it, but that doesn't matter because I don't teach spelling, I teach motion design. All right, now the next step. We've named our pins, they're all legacy. I select all 4 of the pins right here just by clicking their name into form. So we're still in rigging, middle tab, links and constraints, then I click add bones. Those puppet pins are now automatically rigged to the bones I just created. My next step, so this artwork, the puppet pins are parented to the bones. I then parent the bones to the structures. I've already named them, so I know which part of the structure it gets parented to. So I just drag up to the tail 2 bone goes to tail 2 structure, tail 3 bone goes to tail 3 structure, and the tip goes to the tip. Now, this is all parented together. Before I shy enable this, because I don't need to see it in my layer stack anymore, I'm going to click the eyeball icon so those bones don't distract me while I'm animating. That's step 1. I turned off the eye icon, then I shy enable them. Next, because this artwork was parented to the bones are now parented to the structure. Next, I select my structures right here. Selected all 4 of them by holding down Shift. And then I go to, we're still in rigging, links and constraints, auto rig. I'm just going to leave it as is. And it rigs it. And that creates the tail controller. I can now select my structures for the tail. I don't need to see these anymore, so I can click the eyeball icon to turn those off, and then I can shy them because I don't need to see them in my timeline anymore. And I'm left with the tail. So I'm going to unsolo those. And before, remember I told you that if you've got a controller, you can go into your effects controllers panel, scroll down the icon, and move it so that it's not distracting you on the body. That's just going to move the icon for the tail. So I just took it off the body so it doesn't distract us. Now we can test it out. We go to the curve, and like magic, the dog's tail is now curving the way that we want. I now need this tail controller to be parented to the hips. That's the whole body done already. We can do trot with an offset of the front and back legs, which should look pretty realistic, or you can independently trot the legs, like have the front, that one, and then this one move. So you've got the flexibility of independently trotting the legs in the order you want, or trotting them together two at a time, or you can trot all four of them by parenting the hips to the body, which they are, and then parent the body to the chest. So this way, with this full torso rigged, if I trot the front legs, all four of them move. But again, if you want the flexibility of offsetting, just make sure the middle part is not parented to anything. So don't forget, when we did the legs, you changed the paw 2 section and the weight to 100 so that it's resting on the foot properly. So now you've got the whole body working. And we're going to work on the head and the neck, next. This would normally be, pretty fast because you've got, well, I'm saying this is going to take a little longer because you've got so many layers, but I'm explaining why I'm parenting what to what so you don't lose your artwork along as you rig. Now, these 3 layers, I'm going to keep the eye icon on, and I'm going to shy enable them because they're controlled up here now. So I don't need to worry about that anymore. And it's less layers for me to have to worry about. I'm done with the markers, which we use to line up our anchor points. So I can turn the eyeball off for there and shy enable that. Having fewer layers will cause less accidents. And you see now we've got the fluff moving with the tail. I looked at your artwork and you've got ear fluff. It helps to keep your layers in the order you need them, and just make sure they look properly. If it means having your layers spread out in your stack, fine, but for this, it's not damaging your artwork. So I'm going to parent fluff 1 to ear 1, fluff 2 to ear 2. So now those work together, okay? Now that those are parented, I'm going to keep the eyeball on and shy enable each of those. And I'm going to take your 2 ears and I'm going to parent them to the head. So now watch this. If you rotate the head up, but first, look what I see. The head doesn't rotate from there. So I'm going to move the anchor point for the head. I'll put it right down near the middle where it meets the body. So now when you rotate it, it moves properly, and look, the ears go with it. But in addition to that, since we parented and hid those extra layers, you now can rotate the head when you want and wiggle the ears independently with the rotation for them. Oh, I did the wrong thing. So that fluff goes to that. And then this fluff goes to this ear. So will we shy enable that? Let's try that again. Now it's behaving properly. You just gotta make sure your anchor point is where it meets the head. See, now you can have the ears wiggle separately in their own timing, as well as the head moving together. Let me zero that out. So, like I said, this gives you greater flexibility as an animator. Doing it this way. Rather than pre-compose the head, then you get that little extra life, like twitching in the ears. And it's a simple 3-layer rig. So your ears are parented to the head. The fluff was parented to the proper ears that they needed to be parented to. So now with my head and the anchor point where I want it, I'm going to go back to my controllers, the third tab. We're still in rigging in Duik, and I have a position rotation. This needs to be zeroed, so I go to the middle tab, links and constraints, and I click 0. So now if I move the head, oops, one sec, so I parent the head to that controller. So now if I move the controller, the head moves with it, and if I rotate the controller, oops, let me hit R for rotate, the head rotates with it. So you have to parent that artwork to that controller, and it's going to work just fine. So next, I'm going to turn on the neck. The full body we don't need, so I'm going to make sure that's turned off with the eye icon. I'm going to solo that. And you've got neck fluff. So I'm going to parent the neck fluff to the neck, and then parent the neck to the head. So now if I rotate the head, the neck rotates with it. But the anchor point for the neck looks a little off. So I'm going to put it with the pan behind tool where it meets the body, down here roughly. Now let's test that out. Now it's a little bit more natural. So you've got the full body and the full character rigged, and you saw how you can get two legs moving with a trot, independently trot the legs, or you could have all four of them going if the hips are parented to the body, which they are, and then the body is parented to the chest. That way all four of them will move together. But I strongly suggest not having that middle part parented. So you've got your whole character rigged. And as we set up before, I named this unrigged. So I can go to my project timeline, make a new sequence, I'll call it main animation. And I'll throw that final rig inside it. And I can go back to what we just created, and I can stack that timeline. So let me make sure I'm in that one. Okay, so I'm right in there. I can close this because we don't need it. And I can close that because we don't need it. So now I can just go down here, and we've got a stacked timeline. So you could go P for position and move the whole body as you need to, and then independently animate it up in this timeline stacked together. So you still got the independent rigging, and then you can move the full body. Also remember, you can do your animating up in this timeline with all your controllers, and you can move the background instead of the character in this stacked timeline here. So the background's moving and the character's not. All up to you, but I think this rig will give you greater flexibility as an animator. I'm going to email you this file for reference, and you've got this video to look at as well to see what the different parts of the rig do so that you're not intimidated. But it's all really just position and rotation, and these parts right here will be for moving both legs together, or you can parent them and have all four go together. And of course, selecting the tail, just go up to your effects controller and change the curve. Just remember when you're creating your feet, if you want to do a rig like this, in your effects controller, go down to paw 2 and make sure that the weight is at 100. If you make it greater than 100, see what's happening is going to bend. So that's really up to you if that's what you want it to do. You can make it look like it's leaning forward. That's the way to do that. And you've got other settings here if you want to get more precise with your motion. But I hope this helps, and I think this should be a solution that works for you because you're going to have less character breaking plus more flexibility with these extra added controllers than using the structure in here for the animal. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next week during lab.